Russia's not going to use a nuclear weapon. For them, all the benefit comes from the threat that they might. The sooner we can get Ukraine in NATO, the better, because Ukraine is the best army in Europe right now.
Then we have North Koreans. What can be a real game changer?
Our inaction only leads to more Russian aggression.
Hi everyone, my name is Zhenya Melnik and this is United24 Media. Join us for a Zoom interview with Ben Hodges. Ben is a retired US Army Lieutenant General who served in the High Command of the US Army Europe. He will provide us with some valuable insights of the Ukrainian modern warfare. So, hello Ben, and very nice to see you here. So back in August, Ukrainian forces moved onto Russian territory, which never happened since the World War II. 3 months has passed. How do you evaluate the operation in general? Was it important? Was it successful? What's going to happen next? And what are the lessons to be learned?
So I was impressed with the Ukrainian armed forces operation to conduct this Kursk counteroffensive. We don't know yet how it will ultimately turn out, nor do we know exactly what the specific objective was. I mean, we're not in the government, so we're not entitled to know. So I can only speculate, but I would say three things have been achieved. Number one, it created a real dilemma for the Kremlin. They've had to figure out, do they deal with it or do they find forces to use against it? They can't just leave it there. Obviously, that creates domestic problems for them. It's very difficult for Putin to explain that to his inner circle, that Ukraine has occupied a large piece of Russian territory and held it for over 3 months. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it changed the narrative a little bit. Until that had happened, all we heard about was this constant bombing and killing out in the eastern part in Donbass, around Avdiivka and Pokrovsk and Vuhledar. So this changed the narrative a little bit. And it also, I think, challenged the narrative that somehow Russia just could not be defeated. Obviously, they are very vulnerable. And then the third thing is the introduction of North Korean forces. It looks like some of these North Korean troops are going to be employed there to reduce the bridgehead that Ukraine has established. We don't know that. This is only what we see in open source. But that indicates once again the challenge that Russia has, that they're having to bring in brand new, fresh troops from North Korea to deal with this, because the Kremlin clearly does not have any desire to mobilize men from Moscow and St. Petersburg. And so they'll do everything they can to avoid having to get more manpower out of those two large cities, because they don't want to have funerals going through the streets of those two cities. So I think overall, the Kursk counteroffensive, very effective. And it shows that the general staff understood that while, yes, there is terrible fighting and suffering in the eastern Donbass region, the fact is it's been almost 9 months since Russia finally captured Avdiivka, and they have not been able to go 60 kilometers in 9 months to capture Pokrovsk. So I think the general staff made a wise, calculated risk assessment.
Right. You mentioned North Korean troops, but how big of an issue or a threat is this, if any? What's your opinion?
We don't know the quality of the North Korean troops. I don't. I mean, they have no combat experience, so we'll see how they do when they're fighting against actual Ukrainian soldiers who have so much experience. The North Koreans, they don't know the terrain, they don't know anything about it. They probably are very fit with good equipment. They can do a million push-ups, but they've never been attacked by Ukrainian drones and Ukrainian artillery, and they've never had to try to clear a trench with the Ukrainian defenders. So we'll see. But you can't dismiss 10,000 fresh soldiers. I don't know how many of them are infantry, or do they have artillery? Will they be supported, or will they be employed the way the very unlucky Russian fodder gets put into the meat grinder. This is going to be interesting to watch how they are employed. We don't know what agreement was made with North Korea and uh, Russia, like on how they will be employed, who they report to. Um, so I want to see, but it also creates a opportunity in the Korean Peninsula. Number one, for South Korea to remind North Korea that they're there, that they could do a snap exercise, for example, something to cause North Korea to reconsider their support for Russia. It also should be a signal to us that, Ukraine obviously is fighting not just Russia, but as we know, they're getting aid and support from China and Iran. And now, in addition to ammunition, actual troops from North Korea. I don't know what else it's going to take for the U.S. administration and other governments to realize that our actions, our inaction, only leads to more Russian aggression, and our appeasement has failed.
We are approaching again a winter season, and once again, it is anticipated to be one of the harshest one. Well, for many reasons. First, everyone in Ukraine is kind of anticipating another massive like missile attack, but already October is one of the heaviest months in terms of Shaheed's attack. Then we have North Koreans. Then there are also some reports or rumors, we don't know, about the possible Russian attack in Zaporizhia region. How do you see the development of war actions in this upcoming season?
Well, of course, every winter there is harsh, both the weather conditions, the terrain, and you're fighting. So there's no way around it. It's going to be very difficult. But of course, the weather affects both sides. Russian troops will be operating in the same terrible conditions. My guess is that they will be less well prepared. I mean, they're not as trained. Their logistics system is under a lot of pressure. So I would not say that this is an advantage for Russia. If anything, I would say it the other way. Now, for the civilians, of course, this is terrible. Old people, children, having to survive in unheated buildings because the Russians have destroyed the power grid. Um, this is going to be very difficult. There's no doubt about it. But I have been impressed with how Ukrainians have adapted to how and of course, many nations have sent in portable generators to try and help compensate for the destruction of the traditional power grid. Um, I'm also seeing reports, though, that Russians are complaining about not having any heat. So I think I hope that Ukraine will continue to attack Russian oil and gas infrastructure, power generation, so that they experience what it is they are doing to Ukrainians.
And it links to the question whether Ukraine should be there's been a discussion whether Ukraine should be granted the access to use Western weapon to conduct long-range strikes. So what's your opinion on that? I mean, is it important at all for Ukraine to have this capability? And should Ukraine be granted more wiggle room in the use of NATO like supplied weaponry?
Yeah, I'm extremely unhappy that our government and other governments have not given Ukraine the freedom to do whatever they want with whatever has been provided. This is a terrible policy. There's no legal, moral, or operational reason for it. It's a reflection of the failure of our administration to commit to helping Ukraine actually win this war. And it also reflects, I think, excessive fear that Russia might use a nuclear weapon. Russia's not going to use a nuclear weapon. There's no benefit for Russia to use a nuclear weapon. For them, all the benefit comes from the threat that they might, because they see how it causes us to hesitate. So I would say that the administration, despite all the good things they have done to support Ukraine and keep 50 nations moving forward, the fact that they have not enabled Ukraine to actually win, to defend itself. is to me a terrible mistake that we're going to be regretting for many years. I'm a big believer in the concept of killing the archer rather than trying to intercept all the arrows. We should be allowing Ukraine to hammer every airfield, every place from which Russian attacks originate. And there's no excuse for it and no legitimate reason for it, in my view.
Mm. Thank you. After experiencing the theater of war here in Ukraine, do you think what kind of lessons did or will NATO learn or imply later after having observed what is happening here?
Well, I think three or four things. Number one, that the sooner we can get Ukraine in NATO, the better, because Ukraine is the best army in Europe right now and the most well trained. And they have stopped Russia after 10 and a half years. Russia still only controls about 20% of Ukraine. So, with all the advantages. So I think the first thing we've learned, should have learned, is that we want Ukraine in NATO with us, and that will take a huge burden of security for Europe, as well as making Ukraine safer from an attack from Russia. Number two, we've been reminded of the absolute ruthlessness of Russia, that we should not be uh, naive about their willingness to execute prisoners, murder civilians, attack civilian infrastructure, total disregard for international law. So, why in the world does anybody think that Russia would be a good negotiating partner or that would live up to any agreement? The third thing we should have learned from this is the scope and scale of what's required for modern combat. I mean, the ammunition consumption, the fuel consumption, the damage that gets done, the numbers of people and pieces of equipment that are required. That's, we're not fighting Taliban anymore. This is a different scale and a different type of combat. The next thing, obviously, so many people focus on drones, and clearly that's a new capability or a new type of capability that's out there. But as always happens in wartime, people adjust. You learn how to counter it. So I see every now and then people say, "Oh, get rid of tanks. All you need is drones." But that's not true. Now, every tank I've ever seen destroyed by a drone was sitting out in the open, unprotected, and the hatches are open. All these things that are indicators of poor discipline and poor leadership. Um, I would always want to have uh, a lot of protected firepower and the ability to counter the enemy. So we got to make sure we learn the right lesson, not the wrong lesson about how drones are employed. And then finally, um, we do not have enough air and missile defense. I mean, if Russia makes a terrible decision to attack a NATO country, they will have also already made the terrible decision to attack our infrastructure as well, just like they have done in Ukraine, airports, seaports, transportation, power. Um, and I don't think we have enough air and missile defense to defend all those things. So that's something we have got to address.
So since you brought up the drone topic, Ukraine almost a year ago has launched like a drone forces as a separate branch, right? Which is the first, like we are the first country in the world to do so. What do you think? Should other countries follow this suit, or should drones still remain as an integrated part into existing branches already?
I don't think it has to be either or. I mean, it depends on the type of drones, what is the purpose, what is your procurement and sustainment system. I think, I trust the Ukrainian general staff to do what's best for Ukraine. That may or may not work ideally for a US or German or Polish military. There's a lot of factors that would go into this because all drones are not the same. What are you trying to do? As an infantry brigade commander, of course, I always wanted my own drone capability that reported to me, not something that was centralized somewhere else.
Mhm.
The Air Force always likes to have all of these things consolidated for the advantage is you can generate more sorties. So I mean there are advantages there, but the training and maintenance of these things, I think each nation has to figure out what's best for its own sustainment, procurement, training requirements, as well as how they expect to employ them. Of course, every country is watching Ukraine right now.
Okay, thanks. And the last, I think the last, the last question I'm gonna address. So the word game changer has been used a lot in Ukraine. First, it was, I guess, if I remember correctly, Bayraktars, then it was HIMARS, Western IFVs, now one of the most recent ones is F-16s. In your opinion, for you personally, what can be a real game changer? Is this concept is actually valid? What can really change the situation in the battlefield right now?
I
Or any?
think that you're right that this term game changer is so overused because it implies like not only does it change the game, but it means if you just get this one thing, then we're going to win. Well, of course, that's never been true. Any one thing, and it's more about platforms. How are they employed? What are you trying to accomplish? Um, F-16 by itself, not a game changer. But if you have enough of them and they're properly employed, they can be used to help create effects that could support a campaign or an operation. For me, the only real game changer that matters is when the United States and Germany and UK and France agree and our leaders say it's in our strategic interest that Ukraine wins this war, that Ukraine defeats Russia, knocks them back to the 1991 border. When the United States says that and the other countries I just named say that, then all these stupid policies will be gone. We will start pushing everything that's needed because we've made it clear it's in our advantage that Ukraine wins. That will be the game changer that matters.
And sorry, and I just come up with another question. In your opinion, how the victory of Ukraine will look like? What's the victory of Ukraine is in your understanding?
So, well, first, there's two or three different levels here. Of course, Ukraine is a sovereign nation. The United States can't make Ukraine stop or continue fighting if it doesn't want to. I mean, this is a decision for Ukraine. Um, I believe what President Zelensky has said, restoration of full sovereignty, 1991 borders, is what the aim should be. That's what victory would be. But there should also be, you know, accountability for Russian war crimes, bring home the thousands of Ukrainian children that have been kidnapped and sent into Russia, um, a use of Russian money to pay for reconstruction of Ukraine, and then Ukraine becoming a part of NATO. That would be total victory, in my view. From the United States perspective, for the West, of course, all of those things would be part of it. But one of the other outcomes would be isolation of Iran, because then Iran their only friend is Moscow. This would help isolate Iran from any support. It would isolate North Korea, who also has no other friends other than Moscow. And it would send a message to China that the West really does have the will as well as the industrial capacity to defeat Russia, isolate Iran, isolate North Korea, and we're prepared to fight China if necessary. That's what organizing for victory looks like.
Right. On this hopeful and positive note, I would like to thank you so much, and I wish you the biggest of luck and great day. And thanks so much again. And I would like to thank you, our viewers, for watching this and supporting us. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. Please make sure you didn't forget to click the subscribe button. It will definitely help us grow our channel. Thanks a lot and see you next time.